Hello and welcome to this Mission Innovation side event, Racing to Zero, Regional Perspectives on Climate Neutral Cities, hosted by the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, or GCOM, and the European Commission. I'm Kathy Oak. I'm an advisor to GCOM's Innovate for Cities initiative. So in this session, we'll bring together city and regional voices, as well as views from the next generation of energy leaders and the private sector. This side event provides a unique set of perspectives on the global challenge of meeting and reaching climate neutrality and the role of cities across the world. We will address multi-level participatory governance approaches and the technology, social, cultural, communication, and policy innovation needs to deliver climate goals. We will address the key role of cities, key tipping points at urban systems level. This event is designed to further expand in the supporting community and to help evolve the urban dimension of mission innovation. So I hope you enjoy our session that we'll begin now. Okay, now we're going to talk about the importance of cities in achieving climate neutrality and why they're crucial. I would like to welcome to speak to me about this Andy Deacon, who is the Global Covenant of Mayors Acting Managing Director. Andy is a former Sustainable Energy Investment Forum manager at the Climate Alliance and joined the Global Covenant of Mayors in January 2020 as Director of Strategy and Operations. Thanks for joining us, Andy.
Thank you, Kathy, and delighted to participate.
Yeah, so it's a pretty important question, but please, let us know, what makes cities uniquely positioned to contribute to achieving climate neutrality globally.
Thanks, Kathy. So we live in an increasingly urbanized world, and that's true both in the global north and in the coming decade as well in the global south. And that trend will really accelerate. So around 80% of the world's population is expected to live in cities by the year 2050. And the urban population will grow by around 2.5 billion people over the next 30 years. And cities are both therefore economic and growth engines, generating around 80% of global GDP, but are also major sources of greenhouse gas emissions, accounting for around 70% of emissions. And it's really in cities that we can expect to find hotbeds of innovation, opportunities to work across multiple sectors, and really without action in the world's urban areas, then national governments run the risk of not being able to meet or deliver against ambitious global carbon targets.
So what's significant about 2030? Why is it so important to have this critical mass of cities to commit to this climate neutrality by 2030?
So the next decade is really important. Investment cycles for major pieces of green infrastructure can be quite long. And so we need action really within the next few years to avoid lock-in in the longer term to much more higher emissions, carbon intensive development pathways. And it's not only about a small number of mega cities. We need to be expanding the mechanisms to build on experience from early movers, to share what they've done, and to engage that much broader audience of medium and smaller sized cities. So we know from previous research that around half of all urban emissions abatement potential will come from small and medium-sized cities. So we need to be engaging with cities, helping them wherever they are on their climate action journey, but gathering together and taking action towards a much larger critical mass of the world's cities taking meaningful action towards net zero.
And how do these city commitments affect the global abilities to reach climate targets?
It's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. So without action in cities, then national governments won't be able to meet ambitious international commitments. But we also know that cities don't have all of the powers to deliver everything that they might want to achieve on their own. And so we have ongoing work to look at the levers that are available to mayors and local leaders to be able to drive policy, whether that's in in land use and urban planning, in transportation and clean mobility, working jointly with the private sector on energy systems innovation. And really, it's about finding that sweet spot that enables local leaders to take appropriate action that sits within the context of their individual city, and allow and recognize that at national level to really drive the meaningful engagement of national climate plans and targets.
So I can imagine that partnerships are pretty important, in particular between national and local governments. I assume you're going to agree, but, do you want to elaborate on how these partnerships between national governments and local governments are really crucial to achieve climate neutrality?
Yeah, sure. We've been, as the Global Covenant, undertaking some work on the idea of regional and local contributions towards nationally determined contributions, and look forward to advancing that through the course of 2021 and towards COP26 later in the year. What we want to do is to kind of recognize that there is additional local ambition that can kind of help increase the level of ambition at the national level, and that local leadership really is a valuable additional contribution to some of the national policies, plans and programs that national levels of government are bringing forward. And those partnerships are important, but also for us then important to think about the multi-sector nature of the challenge to reach and deliver net zero emissions in cities. And really, in addition to the vertical integration, as we would talk about it in policy terms, then also important to talk about how we work across different sectors in a horizontal sense to really deliver a kind of full package that delivers resilient, clean, connected cities of the future.
You've presented nicely a segue to the rest of the session. Thank you, Andy. We certainly will be talking with a range of actors who are helping, as you've said, in partnership with cities to achieve climate neutrality. So thank you, Andy, for joining us. Andy Deacon from the Global Covenant of Mayors.
Thank you very much, Kathy, and thank you for the opportunity again to participate in the session. Thanks.
Okay, we'll hear now from Matthew Baldwin from the European Commission, and he's going to provide an update or an introduction, in fact, to innovation-driven urban transitions.
Hi, my name is Matthew Baldwin. I'm from the European Commission here in Brussels. I'm the EU's coordinator for road safety and sustainable urban mobility, and most recently I have the honor to be the mission manager for our mission to create 100 climate neutral cities by 2030. That's kind of a lot by way of a job title, but I'm very honored to be with you today to contribute to the high-level panel on regional perspectives on climate neutral cities, and more broadly to be part of what I understand is the 6th ministerial of Mission Innovation. Why is the work we're doing together here so important, indeed so critical? It's because we face an existential challenge. The latest report of the World Meteorological Organization from March of this year shows that climate change is relentless, remorseless. We have no respite from the pandemic. The last 6 years, including the COVID year of 2020, have been the 6 warmest years on record. Against this background, we, like you, are gearing up for the United Nations Climate Conference, COP26, in Glasgow in November. We need to demonstrate together that we are taking, and we are planning even bolder steps on mitigation and adaptation in response to this existential challenge. We believe that the European Union is answering the call for action. If you look at what we have proposed in the European Green Deal, we are pledging to be climate neutral as a continent by 2050. No baseline necessary. Climate neutrality needs no baseline. We will be planning to reduce our emissions by at least 55% by 2030. We have developed a new EU climate law to put these formally, legally, into effect. That means ambitious efforts on all sides. but we see a strong upside to it as well. We believe the current decade will play a pivotal role towards kickstarting a green recovery in the European Union, and I hope in the rest of the world, and at the same time see us take major steps towards climate neutrality. So why cities? In short, cities can be the vanguard of this essential work. Cities are, if you like, the make or break pieces of this gigantic global jigsaw puzzle. So let me say a word about what we're planning to do in the European Union, and then I'd like to say how I think this fits in with the exciting work that's going on at the global level through Mission Innovation. So the EU mission on 100 climate neutral cities by 2030 has this name mission baked into its title. This name was chosen deliberately to use the radical tool of innovation to deliver real bureaucratic cut-through to help deliver on the targets I mentioned a moment ago under the European Green Deal, in particular that ambitious goal of reducing our climate emissions by at least 55% by 2030. I understand this same spirit of the mission is part of Mission Innovation as well at the international level. And that's our intention at the EU, to turn, if you like, innovation on its head. Not to say, let's fire 20 different projects into the air to see what's the best answer to a particular problem. We know what the problem is, and we know where we need to end up. And we need, as the President Ursula von der Leyen put it well in her State of the Union speech last September, a European-style BARDA, a cut-through to deliver those results, to push lesser problems to one side and really to deliver. It is ambitious to do this in the European Union, to have 100 cities making this major contribution. There's a lot of interest in European cities in this objective. A number have already indicated their readiness. There is a tendency at the moment for those cities to be from the north and west of Europe, and we need cities from all across Europe, the north and the west, the east and the south. We can't just have what we might call the usual suspects, the Copenhagens, the Amsterdams, who are already taking major steps towards these goals. Research and innovation will play a major part of our efforts, particularly in the inception phase, but increasingly we know what we need to do. We have the vaccine, if you like. The innovations will increasingly be in governance, in involving our citizens in those decisions, bringing in the new European Bauhaus, which I'm sure you've been talking about today, and in the organization, the replication, the scalability of the changes needed in cities and needed to deliver not just in the first 50, but across the whole range of European cities by 2050. So indeed we have twin objectives: to deliver the first 100 by 2030 and to have all cities be climate neutral by 2050. To that end, it's important that we are diverse from the outset, that we address the fragmentation that cities sometimes perceive in terms of the EU policy offer. There's lots of different interesting schemes that support urban action to deliver on climate change or reduce pollution, but we need to try to bring this together for cities in a synergistic way to enable cities to develop. And of course, there are major issues relating to funding and financing. A study conducted for us by Material Economics estimated that it roughly averages at about 1 billion per city, taking an average population size of just 100,000. That's the average cost of delivering climate neutrality over this time frame. And if you take a bigger city like Milano, you can multiply that number several times over. So funding and financing is going to be crucial. We will be asking cities to think about an investment plan, which of course we'll work on with them in coming forward with their ideas on how to be climate neutral. So just very briefly on the process, we have these two objectives. We hope, subject to a political decision in the Commission to be taken this summer, to be launching a call for expression of interest this autumn, and then for the first cities to begin their work towards climate neutrality in what we're calling climate city contracts, a memorandum of understanding with us at the Commission, working with their national governments, with their regional governments, to explain how they propose to do it, and setting out very clearly their expectations on what they need from us in terms of helping them to deliver this. And this co-creation of climate city contracts is going to be the nub of this process, and we hope to see the first contracts emerging as soon as the second half of next year, 2022, if things go according to plan. Let me conclude by linking it back to the work that you're doing in Mission Innovation. We know that the EU's efforts alone will not be enough. This is the tragedy of the global commons. The risk is that none of us move because we can't on our own solve the problem. We are determined to move ahead, but it's also why it's very important that under the umbrella of Mission Innovation, that we've teamed up with the Global Covenant of Mayors, with whom, by the way, we'll be working very closely with our own European plans, to look at the ways in which we can put together a global mission for innovation-driven urban transitions and bring a critical global mass of cities to innovate for net zero. Such a global mission hub would be most welcome and a major contribution to our own efforts. It would link the different mission-based approaches from across the world, from activities from, again, the East and the South, the North and the West of the world that share this high ambition for 2030, this willingness to act as innovation models for the ultimate 2050 horizon, where we all have to deliver on these goals. It will help our cities, it'll help our governments, our institutions to shape and deploy the necessary steps, whether it's in innovation or other strategies, to feed off each other's success. It will strengthen on a global scale the business case for increased city relevant spending, for faster uptake of existing and new technologies necessary for the climate transition. In the process, we hope to send a clear signal to stakeholders, to industry, to investors, including the local investors. I love the idea of city green bonds, with investors being able to invest in the change that's necessary in their own cities to realize the co-benefits that come from tackling climate change, whether it's clean air or improved road safety or less congestion or simply lower energy bills. All of these things can help us create a snowball effect. I think there's a tremendous momentum towards what I might call these mission-based approaches to bring cities to the vanguard of our efforts to tackle climate change. They have the potential to make our cities more livable and more lovable, our own lives better, and ultimately to help contribute to a better global future. Thank you very much for your attention today. I wish you every success with this conference.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, to continue this section on innovation and how cities are achieving climate neutrality, I'd like to introduce two more speakers to this session. I would like to introduce Mayor Mohamed Redouani, who is the Mayor of Leuven, Belgium, the current EU innovation capital. And I'd also like to welcome, introduce Lorena Montellanos, who is the Head of Communications and Sustainability in the City Services and Environmental Management Department of the Municipality of Lima, Peru. Thank you both for joining us. So I have a series of questions in this short section, and I will ask the question, and please, I will go to Mayor Redouani first, and then Lorena, you answer, and we'll just go from one question to the other, just to hear your experiences from your cities about innovation and an acceleration towards energy transition in your cities. So let's start with the first question about what types of innovation, technology, social, cultural, communication, policy, what types of innovation are needed for cities to better position themselves to achieve global climate goals?
Well, today we live challenging but very interesting times, in my opinion. We're faced with challenges about climate change, about increasing poverty, inequality, diseases, all kinds of societal problems we need to solve. At the same time, you see that a new kind of strength of power arises very locally in our cities. And if you speak about kinds of innovation, then my first reflection is that we need to define what that innovation should be for. And in Leuven, we tend to say that we innovate for the better and for all. meaning that we seek to solve these challenges I was speaking about, but to do that in an innovative way and to do it for the many, not just for the few. And this is how in the last years we have developed new governance models based on radical participation, where everyone is involved, with strong collaboration with our knowledge institutions, with our NGOs, with citizens, companies. So we collaborate mission-driven in shared decision models, so to achieve goals, to have a climate neutral city, have a more equal city, etc.
And Lorena?
Yes, so yeah, so I think it's really important to take into account the context that we're going to today, that more than ever, the making be really important. We need to have data, we need to have in order to build and work relations to achieve goals and to raise ambition. And still you can know to technology, smart technology that help look.
I think that we are having a few technical issues with Lima. So while hopefully our technical experts can help Lorena, Mayor Ridwana, we might continue with the conversation about cities accelerating this transition to a global, this global energy transition. What are the key enablers that could help drive this implementation? You've already spoken about partnerships, but maybe you could explore that a bit further.
Well, there are a couple of things. First of all, you need leadership in many ways. The good kind of leadership that I describe as being empathic leadership, people that have a vision, that are willing to share that, are collaborative in their DNA. And when you bring that together with shared dreams, like a couple of years ago, we've had many people in Leuven. We wanted Leuven to be greener, to become climate neutral. Well, we established a brand new governance model organization where everyone put its energy in it. My city council, I convinced them to give away powers about climate policy to that organization, which is called Leuven 2030. And since then, amazing things have happened. We've changed our mobility totally, pushing out the cars out of the city, making the air cleaner. Public spaces have become greener, comfortable. We invested heavily in greening of our city, insulating our buildings, etc. And the CO2 emissions go down while the city is growing. So you see that you can really mobilize people, mobilize leadership behind a common goal. And that is what we try to achieve.
Oh, it's really, really interesting. We've unfortunately lost Lorena, and hopefully she can join us later on in our session to hear about what's happening in Lima. But maybe if you just really quickly close with what is the one thing, the one reason why cities are really important for accelerating this energy transition.
I was so happy when the European Commission named us European Capital of Innovation. And they said, look, Leuven has made a tremendous effort and progress in, for example, fighting climate change, in making the city more equal, in providing children access to education, etc., etc. And but they said, look, the way that you did it, the how, this radical participatory approach, making sure that our citizens, and we have a very diverse population, we have more than 171 nationalities because of the presence of the university, amongst others. But we give people, or we try to give them, a sense of belonging. They can contribute to something positive in their community. They're part of it and they're acknowledged. So that one thing, in my opinion, is that a far more bigger focus on collaboration, on bringing together diversity behind larger common goals, or moonshots, as you can call it. And then you see beautiful things happening, and be radical participatory, meaning open up, trust people, be clear about your vision, but trust the citizens and the people to collaborate, to bring abroad their inspiration, and you will see good things happen.
I think that Lorena's about to join us again, and I think when we talk about innovation, what you've just described is very much about social innovation, isn't it? And innovation isn't just about technology, but that radical thinking of cities.
Well, technology is there. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you go.
Technology is there, of course. We are in the university city. We have many bright people, researchers. We use a lot of data. We have a roadmap towards 2030 and beyond. We measure all kinds of things. We measured, but for me, that's not the main goal. This is just supporting actually the change that we want. So it's indeed about technological innovation as well. But it's also about social innovation, ecological innovation. So for me, it's far more broader than purely innovating in technology.
Thank you so much. Now, Lorena, it's great to have you back. And we were just talking about the key enablers to drive implementation in cities and the role of innovation. So yeah, please tell us your story and some examples that you have.
Yes, so lately in Lima, we are really working with smart technologies to actually have access to data. And this is something really important for us because as a city, we cannot make better policies or actually sustainable policies if we don't have a backup of data and science as information backgrounds, not only for this decision making, but also to work with civil society, with the academy, with private sector, and with the national government and other partners in order to actually build solutions for our cities in terms of the climate crisis that we're facing now lately. So this context actually calls us to invest more in this generation of data and also work especially with the smart technologies that can be affordable for cities in order to work on this information. And with that, actually work a lot in matters of education and communications and working in a technical group with an informed society that can help us to achieve our goals.
No, I think that's great. Well, we've unfortunately come to the end of this session that we're recording here on innovation, but maybe Lorena, you can have the final word as you've just rejoined us about the importance of cities in this acceleration and scaling up towards a global energy transition.
Yeah, so the city has an important role in this matter. I mean, we are the producers or responsible of 70% of the worldwide emissions in the city in terms of on this matter. So more than ever, we need to work in cooperation with different partners and more than ever see what other cities are doing and what is working for them, and trying to these good practices to bring us to our reality, changes a little bit to our context, and from that trying to innovate in new solutions that at the end improve the quality of people. And the context of the climate crisis calls us to actually be more connected to science, to be more informed about not only what's happening today, but also what is the expectations and what will happen if we take action and which kind of action. So more than ever, innovation, good practices, joint work with partners will help cities to actually have more ambitious goals in terms of the energy transition and the reduction of emissions and the build of resilience for everybody.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us and joining us for this side event. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck. Bye-bye.
Okay, so in this section, we're going to talk about what cities need to achieve climate neutrality, and in particular, the role of research and innovation. The next two speakers that will join me, firstly is Paris Hadfield, who's a postdoctoral research fellow in urban sustainability in the Connected Cities Lab at the University of Melbourne. Okay, first we'll go to Paris. So Paris, if you can join me to talk about your research. Hi, Paris. It'd be really great if you could provide us a brief background to the research that you've been undertaking for the Research and Innovation Technical Working Group of GCOM.
Thanks, Kathy. So we understand that research and innovation drive social and technical systems change through the application of new ideas, knowledge, products, processes, and policies. City authorities are recognised for setting ambitious climate goals and experimenting with new and innovative systems, technologies, and governance arrangements in response to climate problems. At the Connected Cities Lab at the University of Melbourne, in partnership with Ironbark Sustainability, our research sought to understand how cities integrate research and innovation in climate change action planning and which climate problems cities are prioritising in different regions globally. This work is supporting city networks to develop regionally specific research to action implementation pathways. And so we developed a global database of over 8,000 actions, and we found that cities are prioritising key climate change drivers and impacts in their climate action planning. These priorities include mitigation of residential, commercial and local government emissions and adapting to extreme hot temperature, flood and sea level rise, and water scarcity and drought. Over half of the climate actions in the global database indicate that cities are contributing to transitions in the built environment across energy, buildings and transport. Common roles for city authorities vary by region, but include financing developments or directly providing services, developing strategies and implementation plans, as well as education. Now, to accelerate implementation, there is an opportunity for alignment of city, national and international climate goals, supported by regional coordination of local responses, knowledge and investment. Next slide, please. A second key insight is that almost 20% of city climate actions in our database involve research to understand climate problems and potential solutions, including feasibility studies and pilot testing. A global GCOM survey of city practitioners in 2020 also highlighted a need for innovative financing strategies and city-scale data to progress climate actions. Cities need to be empowered to establish effective mitigation and adaptation actions and to scale up impact to realise their climate ambitions. National enabling environments can include public and private investment in research and development, stronger regulation, and willingness to fund and collaborate with cities. Next slide, please. Finally, city responses to the COVID-19 pandemic again demonstrate city authorities' capacity to innovate. City authorities have established new governance arrangements and services, including joint agenda setting, provision of food aid, youth engagement, and multi-level recovery agreements. Cities and city networks have facilitated knowledge sharing and data gathering, including virtual forums and local COVID-19 monitors. Cities have also developed new infrastructures and technologies, including well-recognised interventions to expand cycling and green infrastructure, provision of shelter and digitisation. And cities have pursued economic recovery through job creation in infrastructure projects and other public funding for cultural and environmental initiatives. In sum, the pandemic creates a renewed imperative for climate action to address public health and other social concerns. And in this context, cities can play an important role in defining local social and environmental needs and priorities in the transition to zero carbon economies.
That's really fabulous research. It's really interesting to see where, what cities are currently doing, but also where they need the support to achieve climate neutrality. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Kathy.
And Rashad Nanavati, who leads the Rocky Mountain Institute's urban transformation work and currently focused on helping US cities achieve their climate sustainability and clean energy goals. And Rashad's helped to establish the Global Cooling Prize, a global innovation competition to help climate-friendly cooling solutions. So I'm actually going to speak to Rashad now. You've joined me on the screen. Thank you so much. And let's start with the Global Cooling Prize. What were some of the key learnings from this?
Thanks, Kathy. It's good to be here. I'd point to maybe three. The first is that broadly speaking, we can do a lot more, a lot faster with respect to the energy transition. So when we launched the prize, a lot of people, a lot of experts told us that we were being completely unrealistic. There was no chance that anyone would be able to meet our prize criteria. Nobody would be able to build a breakthrough cooling technology in less than 3 years. So it feels pretty good that not one, but 2 teams were actually able to develop what we asked for. And what we asked for was an air conditioning solution that delivered basically 1/5 of the climate impact associated with a typical room air conditioning unit. So a real lesson about sort of a combination of audacity and ambition. The second was, a line that economists love to use, which is that incentives matter. The reason the big AC manufacturers were not making efficiency gains is simply because the market wasn't demanding it. It wasn't because they were incapable of innovating. And so the prize in many ways just served as a really, really strong demand signal, a call to action for the AC industry to step up its game and deliver a climate-friendly cooling solution. And just to be clear on this point, the prize money itself was not the primary incentive. The winning teams included 2 of the biggest AC manufacturers in the world, and so they certainly didn't need the cash. They were primarily responding to a challenge. They were responding to a call to action. And it's fun to work on a moonshot. It's fun to do stuff that people think that you can't do. And finally, the third learning for us was really on the power of partnerships, both in terms of how the prize was organized and also in terms of the teams that did really, really well. So the prize only worked because it was backed by a really broad coalition: governments, nonprofits, academia, philanthropy, industry associations, Mission Innovation included. If it had just been RMI, it would have been ignored. And it became a lot harder to ignore when a really diverse group of actors from all across the world were essentially calling for the same thing. And likewise, the teams that did the best were the ones that were able to form effective multidisciplinary partnerships between AC manufacturers, universities, labs, software companies, architects and designers, advanced materials firms. And innovation often happens when you break down those silos between disciplines. And putting together this breakthrough technology was sort of like assembling a puzzle. No one actor had all of the pieces, so they actually had to actively go out and look for others, find others to fill in the gaps.
Oh, it sounds fascinating. So, I mean, obviously you've spoken about working with Mission Innovation, and this is a side event at Mission Innovation, and you're talking about Challenge 7 of Mission Innovation, which is achieving this affordable heating and cooling of buildings. And I know you've just spoken about some of the insights from your the Global Prize, the Global Cooling Prize, and you talked about some of the cities who are involved, but this is about lots of cities being involved and really accelerating the transition. So, how, based on those understandings that you've just spoken about, how do cities, potentially en masse through something like GCOM best contribute to developing climate-friendly cooling solutions?
I think the first thing to highlight is that buildings alongside transportation account for the biggest share of cities' emissions and actually ambient pollution. So both directly from burning fossil fuels directly in them for heating, and indirectly from the electricity we use to power them and primarily to cool them. So serving these needs in a climate-friendly way as efficiently as possible is absolutely critical to any city achieving its climate goals, or for that matter, its public health and environmental justice goals. And it's really hard to overstate the importance of this. Anywhere in the world you look, low-income communities are exposed to significantly more pollution and climate risk than the rest of us. In the US right now, much of that pollution is actually not from cars and power plants, but from our own homes. So indoor air quality is often worse than outdoor air quality in many jurisdictions. On the cooling side, I mean, you only have to look at India, where barely 10% of the population has air conditioning today. And over 200 million people, so half the population of the EU, could be exposed to deadly heat waves within the next decade. So if you live in a city where the urban heat island effect makes things worse, if you're poor, if you work outside, you really have no way of escape. The good news is that cities do in fact control many critical levers, some levers more than others. And I think as importantly, they're really well positioned to look across different systems, across buildings, transportation, power, land use, and exploit the potential for systemic efficiency between those systems and those sectors. So Innovation Challenge 7 is about heating and cooling buildings. But the first thing we need to do is actually enlarge the problem. If you make it about cooling the whole city, then it makes it a lot easier to cool any given individual building. So let me give you a couple of examples. Green space in an urban context has a massive effect on temperatures, often several degrees. So if you live next to a park, you don't need to crank up your air conditioner as much or as often. So investing and planning optimally for green spaces, large and small, is really, really important. Over 40% of anthropogenic heat, so man-made heat in many cities, comes from cars. So you don't often think about the transportation connection to cooling, but it's really, really important. Moving people into public transit, walking and biking can have a major effect on reducing overall cooling needs. Dark, impervious surfaces, streets and sidewalks absorb a huge amount of heat. So using lighter colored permeable materials can similarly have a huge impact. So these are all things that a city can do even before you get to a building to minimize cooling demand. And then cities can do a lot to ensure that that demand is met as sustainably as possible. One, they can use their regulatory authority, their ability to set and enforce things like building codes and energy performance standards. They can use the power of the purse, their own procurement power to buy the most efficient solutions for municipal buildings and set the right example, whether those are ACs or whether they're comprehensive retrofits. They can sign renewables deals to power those buildings with carbon-free electricity. So both in terms of reducing loads and in terms of serving those loads optimally, there's a ton that cities can and really should be doing.
That's really great. No, thank you so much for your insights. It's really great, to understand really the city specificity of what is needed to reach climate neutrality. So thank you for joining us for this session and for this segment on what cities need to achieve climate neutrality.
Thanks, Kathy. Good to be here.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the importance of showcasing best practice and moving to implementation in cities. And I'm really thrilled to be joined by Helen Watts. Helen is the Senior Director of Global Partnerships at Student Energy. It's the world's largest youth-led organization mobilizing 50,000 young people for a sustainable and equitable energy transition. Thank you for joining us, Helen.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and let's just go straight to the point, the really exciting part. What do or how do young people contribute to sustainable energy transition?
So many different ways. And maybe what I'll do is touch briefly on the Global Youth Energy Outlook that we've been leading over the last year. And so it's a global youth-led research initiative to really understand not just how young people are kind of taking action now and have been taking action, but what they really see as the big priorities for the sustainable energy transition. And what's really exciting for us to see is that over 50% of young people do want kind of a net zero target by 2030. So kind of overall, there is this overwhelming support from young people to really be more ambitious with our timelines, more ambitious with our climate and energy goals. And they really do see cities as a really effective place to be launching solutions and to be making change. Over a quarter of young people right now feel that cities are the most effective at creating change in the energy system, which was really interesting to see. And the biggest block of one of the questions we asked, 40% of young people feel that young people are most effective at changing and influencing the current system at a city level as well. So young people really do see cities as this space to make change. And I think we've seen that through a lot of the solutions that come through our network do involve these more integrated approaches to energy and climate solutions. So young people do want to work with their community members in cities. They want to work with local governments. They want to work with kind of innovation hubs or academic settings that are predominantly in cities as well, to really launch these solutions that tackle kind of the needs of people on an everyday basis, as well as the climate emissions reductions that we need to see happen, and the energy systems change that we need to make happen as well. So there's this really integrated approach that young people naturally come to the space with, and cities are such a kind of well-positioned hub for young people to be able to test and deploy some of those as well. Maybe as a first starting point.
Oh, well, I mean, the energy outlook that Student Energy drafted sounds really fascinating. And maybe you could just, elaborate a bit further on the recommendations that came from that, particularly for city leaders, and maybe even national leaders, because we're talking about both in this session. What are the recommendations to get the most about engaging with these different stakeholders, be that youth, but, all city actors? What did you see as or believe is the recommendation that you'd make there?
Absolutely. So, I mean, kind of a worrying kind of data point that came out of the outlook that we saw, which we also definitely see as a window of opportunity here, is that only 20% of young people currently feel that their perspectives are valued by governments and business. So regardless of them really seeing these actors as ones they want to work with collaboratively, ones that they feel they have the opportunity to work meaningfully with to create change, currently there is this lack of trust that exists with how actors are committing to working meaningfully with youth. And I think that's where Student Energy and other youth-led movements can really come in, because there's absolutely an appetite there for young people to work from the youth side, absolutely. And I'm confident from the other side as well, to work kind of collaboratively together on building innovation systems. And some of the more concrete recommendations that have come out of the outlook are young people really want actors, governments to commit to building local innovation systems for decarbonization that actively engage with youth. So how are governments committing to building kind of innovation hubs, supporting youth-led innovations directly, also to create direct pathways for young people to engage with policy design and decision-making. That's one that we've seen piloted before in cities around the world, but there's so much further to go with that. And we bring a lot of kind of what we call our principles for meaningful youth engagement into this process quite often, because the kind of concept of creating a youth council for a city is not a new one, but there's so much more that we feel can be leveraged there to really contribute more actively to climate and energy goals, being such a huge part of young people's values. And then ultimately, young people are really calling for a just transition and an equitable transition. And that's something that really can't be understated here, is young people feel so strongly that this needs to be an inclusive systems change movement that we're going through. And so actors who are kind of showing up to work with young people do need to kind of make sure that there is this understanding of why those are important aspects to consider, and be kind of prepared to work collaboratively with young people on those more integrated solutions. So those are kind of the three, I think, main call to actions that we're seeing so far from that research process.
Oh, it's really exciting. And I mean, what you're talking about is showcasing best practice and the really, the importance of showcasing, but you're also talking about really, unique best practice. So, and that is working with other levels of society and working from the bottom up. So maybe in closing out this session of the importance of showcasing for implementation around climate neutrality, why is it so important to showcase best practice, and indeed, what is best practice?
Yeah, I mean, best practice is, I think, serves so many important purposes right now. Signal setting right now is so important to really de-risk the idea of implementing new and integrated solutions, and to get actors really excited about their potential. So the more that we showcase kind of what's happening, and they don't need to be perfect solutions, but to really show that, you know, there are commitments from actors right now to get these solutions on the ground, is a great way to just build appetite and to enable actors to really see these as viable solutions that they can implement now. And so that's a really important piece. I think another really exciting area of the potential of showcasing more best case practices is how citizen level and community support can really enable change. And as you get citizen level support and communities engaged in showcasing these best case practices and understanding what the options are, kind of the tools in the toolbox, so to speak, you can get a massive amount of public support for working with their governments on advocating for and implementing new solutions. So I think really activating that citizen level advocacy is a really big piece here, because they can showcase best practices, they can work on them actively, work kind of with their leaders, their elected officials, to kind of build up pathways for how cities could adopt entire new solutions that others are, or kind of new innovative approaches to those solutions that just fit better with their environment. And I think ultimately we need to see best case practices right now, or best practices right now, as a starting point to adapt and innovate and evolve, because if there's anything we've learned from working in the climate and energy space, there is no silver bullet or one size fits all approach to this. So we really need to see those as a starting point to get people excited, to get people aware that there are tools in the toolbox, and to feel like they can kind of build on and adapt those to make them fit with the needs of their environments.
Oh, no, yeah, absolutely. I could talk to you forever. The importance is that you're mobilizing, you know, it's the future generation, not only of the citizens and residents of our cities, but it's the future workforce. And so many cities, including the one I'm speaking from, Melbourne, you know, we're a very young city. It's and students make up a lot of that element, and so it's really important to engage on a range of levels, and you've articulated that very well in closing out this session. So thank you so much, Helen, for joining us, and congratulations to Student Energy for all of the work that you do.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Kathy. Thank you for having me on the session.
Yep, thank you. Well, we've come to the end of our session. Thank you for joining us. This Mission Innovation side event, Racing to Zero, Regional Perspectives on Climate Neutral Cities. Thank you to all of our speakers who've brought their city and regional voices. We've heard views, as you've just heard, from our next generation of energy leaders as well. We hope that you'll be inspired, you've enjoyed the unique perspectives on the global challenge of reaching climate neutrality that cities across the world face. And we thank Mission Innovation and our collaborators for the opportunity to bring this urban dimension to the program.